Hi, folks. If you're Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the current, and it's been going on for a couple of years now, a few years, the globalist desire and to undermine white Western civilization and to degrade, humiliate, and guilt trip it by putting statues of black civil rights people, women in particular, black civil rights people all over the Western world. So it doesn't matter whether you're looking at London or North England or West England or East England or New York, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Sydney, Australia. The desire is to put statues up of supposed black heroes and put them in prominent positions, preferably after having taken down the statue of a white man, particularly a straight white man from history, and then replacing him with these supposed civil rights heroes, or any heroes they can either invent or imagine. Now, there's a real shortage of black heroes or leftist heroes generally. You know, a statue of mass murderer Stalin, or the crazy murderous dictator Chairman Mao or Pol Pot in Cambodia, or any of these, Trotsky, who's very much of the collateral. Any collateral damage is acceptable if you're in pursuit of the ideology. So, mass murder, that's fine, as long as you're pushing your ideology. An attitude, by the way, that the left continues to hold more broadly today. But this idea of putting up statues of black people. Now, there's not many heroes in the black diaspora, and the heroes that do exist or supposedly exist are largely invented, or there's been a massive stretch in the imagination required to come up with the hero status. Civil rights is sort of better ground for them to play on. So there was recently an unveiling of a statue in the United States where politicians from all sides clapped and cheered and waved hands and applauded the unveiling of a statue, a black woman of a black woman statue, and the statue, a very famous, iconic straight white male statue, was taken down in order to put this statue of a rural schoolgirl, 16-year-old black schoolgirl, in its place. Now, this was allegedly a civil rights hero, this schoolgirl. Now, in order to come up with the hero status or the iconic status that they want to bestow upon this teenage black girl from the 1950s, by the way, they have to, contort and somersault and backflip and engage in mad mass stretch type imagination to come up with this one. But they're determined to do it as they search around for these supposed civil rights heroes. But it's not done to elevate the black population, but to humiliate and degrade the white population. That's the sole purpose of this. As feminism is there to degrade straight white male population, mass immigrate, all this sort of thing. It's a wider process of degradation and disempowerment. Nonetheless, let's come back to the Now, I've had a look at all the statues that I can find of the recent, again, the last 2 or 3 years or so, of all these black women's statues, and none of them would appear to qualify for any sort of idolatry or recognition or anything at all. They're either nobodies or simply troublemakers, and their troublemaking has been turned into some sort of perception of heroics. But it's hard. But it's again, given the complete lack of heroes, then they just got to invent them, and that's it. So let's have a look at this one in recently in the United States. Now, she was being radicalized at the age. Well, let me do the setting here. This is in a rural farming community, 100 miles from Richmond, Virginia, give or take, and even further from any large city. But it's a small rural farming community of about 6,000 people or so, and spread out over a reasonably wide area, given, there's no high-rise buildings or anything. This is a rural farming type stuff. And in the 1950s, agriculture was really the primary economy of that area. Now, this black teenager, supposedly a civil rights hero, is being reinvented and recast and reimagined as a civil rights hero on the basis that she apparently led some sort of black student strike at school, on the basis that the black school, because they were segregated at the time, the black school didn't have facilities that were as good as the white school. So on one side of the town, again, it's quite a small town. On one side of the town, there's the black school, and on the other side of town is the white school, and the white school's got better facilities. So this 15-year-old, now how she would know the white school had better facilities, or how she would have any detailed knowledge is quite beyond me, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Now, quite clearly, from word one, you realise she's a pawn in the hands of wider activist forces that are simply using her as the stalking horse, if you will, for creating mischief and ginning up and creating a problem that in reality doesn't exist. But let's have a look at it. Now, apparently there were more black kids in this community than white kids. I don't know. I mean, if you look at the census back in the day, that seems a little bit of a struggle. But anyway, let's just take face value on some of the claims made. So there was a black school that was built for 250 kids. Some even say 200 kids, 200 students. But there were over 400 students enrolled. Now, this is important here. There are 400 black students enrolled, not 400 black students attending, but 400 black students enrolled. Again, some even say the numbers are higher than 400, 430, 440, even 450 was a couple of claims there. So let's just say 400 for sake of argument. And just to make the numbers even, 200, the school was built for 200 people, but there were 200 students, but there are 400 students enrolled. So now, what were their complaints about the differences between the white school in terms of resources and facilities and budgets and all that sort of stuff, to make the complaint that the white school was better off? Now, firstly, there's a couple of things to consider again in the wider arc of understanding here. There was a big drive on at the time to get black kids to go to school and to stay at school, to at least finish junior high school, get a junior high school diploma. So they'd be finishing school at, 15 or something like that. So there's a big drive by educational authorities and government authorities generally. So in the dragnet, if you will, they were picking up kids that either were very intermittent or would drop out of school, say, first or second year high school, second year high school tops, that maybe not even go to high school. So they were picking these kids up in the wider dragnet and saying, hey, you got to go to school. And the idea in a farming community is, oh, no, I need my kids to work on the farm, I don't know, planting the crops or bringing them in or feeding the chickens or, whatever it was, but I need the kids here on the farm. And the authorities said, well, too bad, they're going to go to school and that's it. And so there was a sudden surge in a black enrollment in the schools, or in that school at least. And so this created an artificial, bump in the numbers enrolled. Now, it's pretty clear from, drilling down into the discourse of the day that the non-attendance rate, or truancy as it's called in Australia, the non-attendance rate of the black kids at school was very high. We're talking give or take 50%. So at any one time, you probably only had, or certainly looking at the records, you only had 200, 250 kids attending the schools anyway. So attending is distinct from being enrolled. So the idea that the first complaint was that classrooms were overcrowded. It was a classroom designed for 25 students, but there are 50 students there. So it was crammed. The conditions were intolerable. the teachers didn't have time to spend on maybe students who weren't learning as quickly as others and this sort of thing. So this was complaint number one, classroom overcrowding. Now, you can pretty much knock that out straight away because the attendance rates as versus the enrollment rates, the attendance rate suggested that, again, the non-attendance was, depending on the day and the time, 50% or even greater. So that one we can push that out. So they're using enrollment numbers, not attendance numbers, to say, look at the overcrowding here. There was no overcrowding. The next complaint that they had was that this 16-year-old, 15-year-old girl, black girl, had the next complaint she had was, or supposedly allegedly had. Remember, she was put up to it by activists, but was that the white kids, this is the white schools, had much better facilities such as heating and heating in winter. So she's saying the argument was that the black kids in winter, you sometimes had to wear a coat inside or a jacket or something, a coat inside the classroom during winter because of how cold it was. And only the kids that were nearest to the heater in the classroom, so there were heaters in the classroom, only the kids who were nearest to the heater were warm. But if you were at the, further away you went from the heater in winter, in the classroom heater, the colder it got. Well, that's a statement of the blinding obvious. And it was the same at every school I went to. So, winter time, even in, as early back as I can remember, the winter time you had to wear warm clothing. And look, in winter time, and around there as well, you'd wear warm clothing to school. So this idea that you were especially taking warm clothing because the classroom was cold, that's bullshit. You would have worn warm clothing anyway. It's cold outside and you got to get from wherever you live to the school. So you'd need a coat or some sort of warm clothing to get to school anyway. So you'd already have warm clothing. Now, the idea that the kids closest to the heater were warmer than the kids furthest away from the heater, I mean, what? That's a complaint. That happens in every school, anywhere, at any time, anywhere in the world. And the same was, in high school. I remember in wintertime there was a rush to sit on the heater or gather around the heater in the classroom, and it was never warm enough. Like the closer you were to the heater, so that's just that's a nonsense complaint. The white schools have got warmer heaters or so, that's bullshit. And that was part of this claim that because there are so many kids in the class that they can't all be close to the heater at once or something, and that they have to wear warm clothing in the classroom. Well, we all had to do that. I had to do it at school. And I went to an all-white school. I still had there was well resourced by any measure, and I had to wear warm jackets and so on in winter, as did every other kid. So the idea this was especially a unique form of deprivation for black kids only is nonsense, absolute nonsense, complete nonsense. The next complaint was that the maintenance budget for the school was inadequate, and that some of the roofs during times of storms and so on, so the roofs would leak, and that students had to sit directly underneath the leak and use an umbrella to stop that. That's bullshit. That is bullshit. I was at schools where, in the case of a storm, some of the roofs would leak, especially single-story buildings. The double-story ones didn't seem to, but then the single-story buildings, and particularly the older buildings, where just time and wear and tear and so on. So so this idea that students had to sit directly underneath the leak and couldn't move away, and then therefore had to use an umbrella because that's absolute and utter nonsense. That's a fabrication of the first order. So and by the way, I was a primary school I went to. I was 8 years old or whatever it was. There were some classrooms that leaked during time of heavy rain, and the students moved out the way. Desks were moved. A bucket was put underneath where the rain was leaking. The water was leaking in through the roof, and everything went on. There was no big drama. So that was what they would have done there. So she tried and intimates, or the activists put her up to intimating that students had to sit directly beneath the leak with an umbrella. I mean, that's nonsense. We can just discard that. So the first three primary complaints. Now the next one was that they had a budget, that the maintenance budget was inadequate for things like fixing broken heaters or fixing a roof that was leaking, that sort of thing. Possible argument there, but let's look at the wider scheme of things. In the black school, the vandalism by the black students was just off the charts. Things were being stolen, damaged, brutalized, and so on and so forth. So the maintenance budget was constantly was used to constantly repair the damage that was inflicted by the black students. The white students didn't, vandalize their school or steal from it or grab anything that wasn't nailed down. So the maintenance budget on the white schools could go into things like, repairing a damaged heater or repairing holes in the roof or other basic maintenance facility, repairing the plumbing or whatever. But because the budgets in the black school were being used for, again, replacing stolen stuff and vandalized stuff, the amount of budget remaining wasn't enough to do all the other maintenance tasks that were needed on a day-to-day basis. Again, things like repairing heaters and whatever. So was the maintenance budget inadequate for the black school? It was, but only because of the vandalizing and the theft, not because of. And I've been to a school where there was a lot of non-white students. Mercifully, it was only a short time, but I've been to school with a lot of non-white students. The amount of theft and vandalizing was, I've never seen anything like that. I just couldn't even comprehend what would be the attraction to vandalizing as many things as possible. And I went to an all-white school thereafter, and there was none of that. There was nobody was stealing or vandalizing anything. And I remember, I don't know, I think it was year 10, fourth year of high school. There was a kid came from, it wasn't a white kid, some East European, something like that. I'm just going from memory here. And he would vandalize. So he would bring a screwdriver to school, this kid, and he would unscrew the desks. And so he'd do it, he'd do it with very surreptitiously and very clandestine. And so he would vandalize the desks, remove the screws in them. And it wasn't a high cost thing to fix, but he did that and felt like he was really accomplishing something. And I'm pushing back against the man and this sort of thing. And he had this very strange idea, and yet he was quite unique in that view. He was the only kid that I recall anyway that thought or acted or behaved that way. Very strange. So this vandalizing thing was can be, depending if you're stealing heaters and goodness knows what, it can be quite expensive. And in the school that I went to for a short time, there's a lot of non-white people. They would steal anything that wasn't nailed down. Not every one of them, but many of them. The medical cabinet, things like that, the first aid kit, they could get into it. They just clean the whole thing out. Stuff their pockets, have a bag ready to take everything. Very strange. But this is the difference in behaviour. Now, the final complaint that she had, or again, she was put up to this, but the final complaint she had was that if black kids, there was a black bus and a white bus, if black kids missed their school bus, they were late to the bus stop or something like that, if they missed their school bus, they weren't allowed to take the white school bus, which came around 10 minutes or 15 minutes later or something like that. So her argument was that, well, we should be able to take the white bus if we're running late, the white kids' bus running late. Now, that's a minor thing. I mean, why not be on time? What's wrong with that? So if they missed the school bus, then they couldn't go to school. And her argument was, or part of her argument was, well, so many black kids miss the bus because they're not there on time, and therefore they can't go to school, which is one of the reasons, if not the reason, for poor attendance at the black school. That's bullshit. Just be on time for your bus. The white kids have to be on time for their bus. Why can't the black kids be on time for theirs? Again, already there's an argument forming then, but black kids run to different clocks, different time sequence. So, we're more likely to be late. We're less able to arrive on time. Therefore, you have to have a plan B for us. Well, what about the white kids? No, they can arrive on time, so it's not an issue for them, which is very strange. This is, well, we don't want to. We want to have the same resources, but really we want extra resources and extra allowances, and you have to cut us more slack and things like that. It's already that the whole thing was looking very suspicious. So we've got this 15-year-old schoolgirl whose family, her uncle and various other family members are radical activists from New York, very much part of the NAACP, very, very much supported by Jewish groups and Jewish NGOs, or what would have been the early, the vanguard of the NGO machine back in the day, free legal aid from Jewish lawyers, all that sort of thing. So she was radicalized by her wider family. She lived in New York briefly before moving to this rural town. And so she led a student strike, supposedly, in the black school, one that was heavily coordinated, infiltrated by NAACP activists and goons. And she supposedly led this strike, and she was a tactical genius of some sort, easily duped the principal and outwitted all the teachers, this type of stuff. And so led this strike for equality, quality of resources. But when you actually drill down into it, there's no difference in resource equality. The students were resourced more, black and white students were resourced pretty much the same. You could say there are arguments which in other areas, well, the white kids had better teachers. They had white teachers that were educated to a higher standard. Because already there was affirmative action for black teachers back then. It wasn't called that, but that's what it was. So a black teacher of fairly low quality, or student had been a student of fairly low quality, could still become a teacher, provided they taught in a black school. Now, the argument was, well, we get lower quality teachers. All right, then, well, let's have a high standard for black students before they become teachers. No, we don't want that. We don't want, because then fewer black people will become teachers if we have a high standard. All right, well, what is it you want then? Do you want white teachers? No, we don't want white teachers because they're not like us. We want good quality black teachers who are affirmative action DEI and who are low quality. But we want, what is it you do want? Well, we just want whatever the white kids have. Whatever they have, we want. And we want it because we want it. No, fuck. So already the arguments and the law, the logic, and so this was it. Now this is her. She was 16 at the time of the strike, but the student strike. But a 16-year-old black chick in a small rural township, village almost, farming village, in I think it was 1951 or 1952. Who was radicalized by NAACP people and her wider radical activist family and supported heavily by radical activist groups. And she was scripted and choreographed in the strike. There was no way it was her idea. She's now touted as a heroic, girl boss chick who fought back against the evil white Nazi fascist oppressor, white supremacist swastika. And just to add sort of to the courage credentials, she supposedly was victimized and targeted by the Ku Klux Klan that burned crosses and Nazi flagged her everywhere and swastika and Sieg Heil. The reality is just a simple, and not too bright, by the way, a simple-minded schoolgirl from the, out in the sticks was used as a pawn by the radical activist groups to just stir up and make some mischief over issues like whether or not the school maintenance budget was adequate. You can't find a single thing where there's the complaint list. You can't find, I believe, a single thing where she actually had a legitimate complaint about something. So there you go. Now that statue of that schoolgirl, that teenage schoolgirl, that's put forward as this heroic, kick-ass, girl boss, black girl boss, is a statue, has been given a pride of place statue in Washington, D.C. Are they that desperate for heroes? They're doing this. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.